Religion destroys us. Religion makes us feel like we can never do enough to make God happy. Religion makes us feel distant from God. But that's not what Jesus wants from us. He wants our heart. And when He has our heart, He begins to change us on the inside. And what happens is we begin to love Him because He first loved us. Join us today as we continue in Luke chapter 4. Now, Jesus tries to tell these people, the religious people, that he came for everyone. He didn't come for just the religious people, so He came for anyone regardless of their race and their background and their status and whether they were dying of AIDS or they were prostitutes or drug addicts. And so he's telling these religious people that this is why I came, for the oppressed and the people that are blind. And He said, I understand that you are a religious group of people and you memorize the Torah and you throw some money in the offering plate and you do all those kind of things. But He said, that's not what matters to me. I want your heart. I want the people who know that they have a need for me. Like, I need Jesus because I'm lost without Him. Those are the people I need, not these self-righteous people. So what I wanted to ask today was a couple questions, and I had to ask them for myself, and you need to ask them to yourself. So the first question is, why do you go to church? Why do you even do that? So think about it. Like, why do I go to church? Why do you give money? Like, why do you tithe? Why do you do that? Is it because someone tells you have to? What's the purpose behind what you do? Why do I read my Bible? Why do I run from temptation? What are the reasoning behind what I do, why I do what I do? And so I think we need to question that, because if your answer is because I really want God to love me, because if I don't do these things, God's going to be really mad at me. If I don't do those things, I'm going to go to hell. I mean, I'm not going to go to heaven if I don't do these things for God. And I want you to know that if you answered that question in any of those manners, that you probably are one of the people that Jesus came to free, that you're religiously oppressed. You maybe it's your background, maybe you were raised that way, but Jesus wants to step in today to your life and say, I want you to be free of this. It has nothing to do with what you do for me. It has everything to do with you asking me in your life. I come in and I change you from the inside, and you're going to start doing things because you love me, not because you feel like you have to. There's a big difference. Romans 8:1 says, therefore, there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. And he's saying that when He comes into our lives, God sees us with the covering of Jesus. He doesn't even look at us, and now our life is on this path to grow in our relationship with Him. And we're going to fall and we're going to do stupid things. And that's just the Christian life. So we need to get through that. I had to walk away last night thinking, I was stupid. I was probably mean. And I had a choice, because I can get really down on myself. Like, I should never teach. I can't do this. I'm so pathetic. And yet I had a choice to do that, or to say, you know what, God, thank you for forgiving me. Thank you for showing me my rotten attitude and help me to never do that again. Now let's move on. Okay. And some of you may need to do that, because it's really hard to feel oppressed all the time. It's not a fun place to be. So I started thinking, okay, He doesn't want religion. So what does He want? What does Jesus want? And so it's in Matthew 22:36. It says, teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? And He said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the great and foremost commandment. So what Jesus says is, I don't want your hard work. Please don't work to make me happy. I want you to love me. That's the most important thing. And so I want to talk about what that means. First, I'll tell you about my dog. I have a dog. Her name is Bella. Somebody gave her to us. And what we did was, we went to Scottsdale. If you've been here for a while, you remember me telling you about her. She's kind of like a black lab. She's kind of big. And someone said she ended up at someone's house and they don't know what to do with her. So would you like her? So we're like, okay, great. What I need is another dog. So we went out to pick her up in Scottsdale, and she was so scared. Picked her up, put her on my lap, had a little collar around her. And so I'm petting her. I'm thinking, okay, she's just going to love me. Okay. So we got halfway home, rolled down the window for some reason. She jumped out. And I was like, and luckily I had a hold of the thing. So I'm like, Rob, what are we going to do? So he runs around at the stoplight and goes and gets her and puts her back in the car. I'm like, you're so stupid. Like, what's the problem here? So we get her home and we have this backyard thing, put her in. I'm like, okay, here's some water, here's some food. We are going to love you, but we do have to run to go to church. So we'll be back. So we were not away from her for 5 minutes. She jumped the fence and took off into the middle of the desert because we live in. I'm like, well, you had your chance. You had your chance because we promised to love you and you decided you wanted to run away from us. So whatever, that's your problem. Midnight that night, we hear the greatest howling I thought it was a coyote. And so I jumped up and I went and opened the door and she ran in. So she found us again, which is kind of cool. But what was interesting is that every single time I'd be like, Bella, time to go outside and go to the bathroom. She would run, cower down. I'm not going outside because she was so fearful that I was never going to let her back in again. And I was trying to think of an analogy like how God lets us out to go to the bathroom but I could not come up with one. So I'm like, okay, that's not working here. But the coolest part is that the other day I said, Bella, outside. And she just ran out. And I looked at Rob and I go, look at what's happened in like the 6 months that she's lived with us. She's grown to realize that and trust me and know that I love her. I'm not going to hurt her, but that takes time. She didn't know that when I first got her, but she knows that now because every time I open the door, she goes out, I let her back in. And so she's learned my love for her. And that's what I think Jesus is saying. He's saying, look, you need to learn to love me. I care for you. I want the best for you. I don't, like yesterday, it was so weird. She runs after my car. And we live in a big space, so she runs out, but then we have a fence. And she stops right at the fence. She knows I am not allowed to go past that fence. And I'm like, that's the coolest lesson. It's like, she's learned my love, so stay in here. Yesterday, my ridiculous day, she ran down the street, and there's cars coming, and I'm like, so I stopped my car, and I'm yelling at her, get back in the yard, get back there. But that's not the norm. Like, and it gave me this picture of God saying, whenever we get outside the fence, he really lovingly is like, get back in the yard, because if you stay out here, you're going to get hurt. So she gives me lots of great analogies. But I think the thing with love is that for Jesus to say, I want you to love me the most, I think that it takes time. It takes time to build that. When you first become a Christian, you're not going to suddenly be like, oh, I love Jesus. You don't know him. You can't love somebody that you don't know. Rob and I have been married for, almost 35 years, I think. And I love him more today than I did then. I didn't know what love was back then. But now we've grown together. We've gone through the hard times together, the difficult times. And now I love him more because of what we've been through. And I think that's how God is. He's like, you know what? I'm going to be there in your darkest days and your most difficult times in your life. And when I'm there for you, your love is going to grow for me because I'm going to be the one that's going to comfort you and give you that peace. And I think our love grows as we do stupid things like I did this last week. And we see his forgiveness and his grace and his compassion. And then I'm like, you know what? I just really love him because he loves me so much. And I think love grows when we read about him. That's why this study is always about, please pick up your Bible. Or Bible. Either one is fine. Pick up your Bible and read it because in there we learn with our minds everything there is to know about God and what he's like. And we want to learn that so that we can love him more. So what we do is we find ourselves, the more we love him, when we get to the other end of that, now we're doing things for people, or we're going to church, or we're tithing because we love him, not because we feel like we have to. So religion says, I feel like I have to. Love says, I don't feel like I have to. I really, really want to because of everything he's done for me. Now, I normally don't do this, but I don't know why I have to do this. So today, I want to tell you about a book. And I don't normally ever read something out of a book unless you have it in your handout, because I hate that when people read. I'm like, oh, you yawn. You think like, what am I going to have for lunch? But somebody needs this today, and I don't know whether it's here, online, Roku, I have no idea, but it was really impressed upon me that I need to read this. And I want to because it's a book called Second Guessing God by a man named Brian Jones. And it's called Hanging On When You Can't See His Plan. And so I want to read a little excerpt from that because sometimes as we grow in our relationship with God, we have these pits and valleys, or mountaintops and valleys. And sometimes when we go through the valleys, our faith grows really, really cold. And we start feeling like, God, where are you? You're so distant. I feel like you don't love me anymore. I feel like you don't care for me. And I think about that with my dog. Sometimes I'll get out of my car and she comes running up to me and I don't even I know she's there, but I don't pet her or talk to her. I'm just like, I just have other things to do. And sometimes we feel that is what God does with us. And so I wanted to read this little excerpt out to you because for me, when I went through a depression a few years ago, this literally saved my life. And I don't even know why I feel like I needed to read this to you today, but I feel like somebody needs this, and I think hopefully it will. If you don't need it now, you may need it someplace. So keep this in the back of your mind, what he's saying here. Brian Jones, he says, the year before I graduated from seminary, I lost my faith in God. That's not a smart thing to do, I'll admit. There's not a big job market out there for pastors who are atheists. But I couldn't help it. He said life was becoming too painful, truth had become too open to interpretation, the Bible seemed too distant, and as a few of my professors gleefully proclaimed, too unreliable. My doubts seemed to climb on top of one another, clamoring for attention. Before I knew what happened, the new car smell of my faith had worn off, and I found myself fighting to hang on. For the next 6 months, I bought every book I could find that claimed to prove the existence of God. Having so many new books was a good thing, but I rarely slept. There were nights I went to bed at midnight, found myself staring at the ceiling 6 hours later when the alarm went off. After a while, I started taking cold medicine or sleeping pills every few days just to get some sleep. He says I took long white hikes in the wood. He just didn't know because his faith just felt like it was failing. So he says, one night in a last-ditch effort to salvage whatever remnant of faith I had left, I called a mentor of mine from college and shared my struggle. I told him, my faith in God is right now like a walk on the beach. I've taken off my shoes, and as I stand on the water's edge, the tide has started to roll across my feet. It feels wonderful. Up to this point, my spiritual journey had been incredible. But in the last 6 months, doubt had begun to paralyze me. It's like when the water goes back out to the ocean, it's washing away the sand underneath me, and my feet keep sinking lower and lower and lower. And if this keeps up, there won't be anything left to stand on. And I think some people feel that way. They're just like, my faith is just going farther and farther and farther away, and it just feels like I have no support, and I get that, and sometimes that can throw you into a depression. And this is what he said. He paused without hesitation. The man talked back to him and said, Brian, I have stood where you're standing. I felt the water cascade across my feet. I know how wonderful that feels, but I've also had the water go back out to the sea. I felt the sand get washed out from underneath my feet. He paused, I think, because he heard me crying. Before he slowly finished, Brian, listen to me when I say this. When the last grain of sand is finally gone, you're going to discover that you're standing on a rock. And he said, that one statement saved my life. And that's how I feel, too, that sometimes we have to realize that that most of you are going through something that's really tragic or sad, and you just feel like your faith, you can't connect the two, and God's just so distant. And I just want you to know that when it's all said and done, you're still going to be held by God, standing on that rock. He's going to be the anchor to everything that you're going through. And we need to just know that as you're going through these kind of things. Now, I have no idea, so hopefully that was for somebody that really needed that. Okay, next book I want to tell you about is John Ortberg wrote a book called When the Game is Over, It All Goes Back in the Box. Okay, it's a really good book, but it reminded me of what we're talking about with Jesus. Jesus says that the only thing that matters in this world is loving him and loving people. So that's what we do. But John Ortberg wrote this book about his grandmother and how she taught him how to play Monopoly, but she was a great, great Monopoly player. And so she always won, and that was just the way it worked. So one summer, he had a friend that moved in that taught him how to play Monopoly. So he's ready for Grandma when she comes in. So Grandma comes in town. He's like, Grandma, let's play Monopoly. He just wipes her off the board. I mean, he's like, this is the coolest thing in the whole world. So he beats Grandma, And then Grandma has one more lesson to teach him. And she said, I just want you to know that when it's all over, everything goes back in the box. All the property, all the money that you've accumulated, everything, you fold it back up and it goes in the box and it goes on a shelf. And it's the same thing with us. She said the only thing that matters in life, at the end of your life, is who you loved and who loved you. And I think that's what Jesus is trying to get through to these religious people, that it's not about you doing things for God, but it's about loving him and loving his people. And that's, in the end, what it's all about. Okay, that was a long, I think, introduction since we have 10 minutes left. I guess we're not getting to demons today. Okay, the second takeaway from the whole religious thing is that this is going to sound really weird, but we live in the United States, okay? And in the United States, most people make more money than $2 a day, okay? So a third of the world's population lives on less than $2 a day. So we tend to think that sometimes we fit our idea of who should and shouldn't come to Jesus all because of where we live. So if you live in an upper middle class place where everyone drives nice cars and they go boating on the weekend, we kind of tend to think like, those are the people that Jesus came to save. Now, Jesus does love boaters and nice car people. He has no problem with that. But I think because we live in the United States and we're very blessed here and we make more than $2 a day, we tend to forget the people that Jesus really does care about. And those are the alcoholics and drug addicts. The people that maybe are in your family that you're just like, oh, I can't stand that person. He's a drug addict and he's an alcoholic and, oh, he's just pathetic. Okay, that's who Jesus comes for. He wants you to love them to him. And sometimes that's really, really hard. He came for the homeless guy. The guy, and I have a hard time with this. I go driving by, someone's like, hey, need work. They hold their sign up. I don't give them money because I'm convinced they're just a scam and you're just going to go buy drugs with the money I'm going to give you, so I don't do it. Okay. But then I had to step back and say, but that's what Jesus died for. He really does. So maybe I don't have to give him $5, but maybe I can pray for him. Say, God, I don't know what his story is and if he really needs the money or not, but God, would you save him somehow? You came for people like that. I think Jesus came for the people who have AIDS. The people who have lived in a homosexual lifestyle all of their life, and you're sitting here going, how could they live like that? That's just ridiculous. That's sinful. Sin, 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 sin. And Jesus is going, yeah, I love him, and that's who I came to save. Now, could you maybe be nice to him and maybe share Jesus with him? That might be a novel idea. So he says, then he came for, like, you have a neighborhood. Here's your house. On the left, you have some divorced woman who's, you see guys over at her house all the time. Over on the right, you've got, Bob and Betty who are living together and they're not married. They're living in sin. Okay, so now you're stuck with these people and you're just like, well, there's just such sin in my neighborhood. Okay, well, here's the deal. Jesus is going, I died for those people. I want you to be Jesus to them so that they can come to know me. Okay, so it's who we love. We love Jesus first. Because of that, we love those people. Those are the people that Jesus came to die for, along with religious fanatics. We've been talking about religion. Some of you were steeped in religion. I've told you this before. My mom, she was raised, you go to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday, Monday, you do this, you do that. She couldn't go to dances. She couldn't wear makeup. And by the time she got married to my dad, she said, I'm done with this religious thing. She quit going to church until we were I was probably, 20 some years old when I said, Mom, I'm kind of nervous here because, and she said, Lisa, I was so religious. I couldn't do it anymore, which makes total sense. She didn't understand that it's not religion that God was looking for, but it was just a relationship for her to love him. But she never got that. And so I would say she was religiously oppressed. And Jesus wants to come in and say, look, there's so much freedom here. There's so much freedom to love me. And that's what he wants from us. But we can be, and I am talking clearly to myself here too, really, really judgmental. We can sit back and say, well, I'm not on drugs. I don't drink alcohol, or if I do, it's only one glass of wine. I'm not that way. I'm not that much of a sinner. And so we become judgmental, and Jesus is going, please don't do that. I came for those people. So I think we need to relook at how Jesus looked at things and say, he looked at, that's why he came, to free those kind of people from their religious thinking. So my thought is, instead of talking bad about people, we need to pray for them more and more, pray that God would use them. So that's why he came. Now, let's go on to Luke 4, and we'll just probably end up stopping there. You guys have a Holy Land book? I don't. Just kind of sad. They're all back there. I just forgot to bring one up here. Luke 4, verse 31, Jesus leaves Nazareth, and he's now going to make his hometown Capernaum. And Capernaum is north of the Sea of Galilee. Hi, sweetie. Thank you so much, Miss Galen. So I wanted you, if you don't have one, I want you to be able to see these places. So if you look at page 49 in your Holy Land book, I want you to see that Capernaum is a real city, a little town. It's on the Sea of Galilee. And the cool thing is that if you look on the picture to the left, the picture on the, you see a synagogue, a white synagogue to the right, and then you have this weirded out like octagon building, and that is actually the ruins of Peter's house. They've come to realize that. So when Jesus came to Capernaum, this is exactly where he would have been walking and standing. Now, if you see that synagogue, I think on the next page you'll see a bigger picture of it. On the next page to the right bottom. What it is that synagogue there was on the 4th and 5th century, built in the 4th or 5th century, but underneath it would be the ruins where Jesus was at this synagogue. So you can almost just look at these pictures and say, oh my gosh, that's exactly what it looked like. There's the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus was right there. And so it kind of gives us a better picture of where he is and what he did. So anyway, he goes to the synagogue, Peter's home, and he's on the north side, and look at verse 32. And they were amazed at his teaching, for his message was with authority. So he comes to Capernaum in the synagogue, he starts teaching, and they're used to hearing some rabbi get up, blah, 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 blah. Okay. And they're just like, yeah, whatever, it's just religion, it's just church. And then Jesus comes in and he's like, guess what? I got some really cool stuff to tell you about God that you probably never knew before. So now they're looking at him going, he's got so much that I've never heard someone who feels like they know God as well as they do. And so Jesus is teaching. So verse 33, in the synagogue was a man possessed by a spirit of an unclean demon, and he cried out with a loud voice. Okay, we're not getting into demons today. We will do that next week. But what I do want to show you really quick is that in the synagogue, there was a man possessed by a demon, which is a great reminder to you and I that in the church, there are going to be crazy, sinful, goofy people. That's just the way it is. So we need to realize why the church is even here, because the problem is that we think the church is a place where we should all get together and dress up and everyone's perfect and no one's a sinner, and yet the churches should be hospitals for the sick. Okay, I remember about 8 or 9 years ago, I went to church, sitting in the back, and this girl walks in. Okay, we were talking, I think she just got off of her morning job as a hooker, okay? We're talking short skirt, pastor's in the middle of teaching, and she just walks up to the very front. Okay, I'm in the back going, who does that? Like, what is your problem? That's ridiculous. Okay, now, I never realized that maybe this was the first time she's ever walked in the doors of a church. Maybe she was a prostitute. Maybe she didn't, we don't know their backgrounds. So maybe we need to be a lot less judgmental and start embracing the people, because that's what our church is for. So I want to end today by reading in your handout, Jefferson Bethke, I guess is what his name is. He wrote this. Cheyenne was walking with me one day, my daughter, and she said, Mom, I just read the coolest thing on the internet from this guy. So I want to read this, and then hopefully we can walk away today saying, am I religious? Or do I really understand what this relationship with Jesus is all about? So Jefferson, he writes, why I hate religion, but love Jesus. He says, what if I told you Jesus came to abolish religion? What if I told you voting Republican really wasn't his mission? What if I told you Republican doesn't automatically mean Christian, and just because you call someone blind doesn't automatically give you vision? See, we can be so judgmental and say, well, that person, but we're blind to what's really going on. He says, I mean, if religion is so great, why has it started so many wars? Why does it build huge churches but fails to feed the poor? tells single moms God doesn't love them if they've ever had a divorce. But in the Old Testament, God actually calls religious people whores. Ugh, that's kind of scary. Religion might preach grace, but another thing they practice is they tend to ridicule God's people. They did it to John the Baptist. They can't fix their problems, and so they just mask it, not realizing religion's like spraying perfume on a casket. I love that. I thought that was great. See, the problem with religion is it never gets to the core. It's just behavior modification like a long list of chores. That reminded me of my mom, because it's like there's a long list of chores, but there's nothing that wanted to change in her life. She didn't know that's what it was supposed to be. He says, let's dress up on the outside and make it look nice and neat. But it's funny, that's what they used to do to mummies while the corpse rots underneath. Now, I ain't judging. I'm just saying quit putting on a fake look, because there's a problem if people only know you're a Christian by your Facebook. I thought that was brilliant, because it's like, isn't that true? You're like, hi, what are you? Christian. Really? That shocks me, okay? So please don't do that. He says, I mean, in every other aspect of your life, you know that logic's unworthy. It's like saying you play for the Lakers just because you bought a jersey. You see, this was me too. But no one seemed to be on me, acting like a church kid while addicted to pornography. Acting as if I was simply created just to have sex and get wasted. See, I spent my whole life building this facade of neatness. But now that I know Jesus, I boast in my weakness. And this is the greatest part. Because if grace is water, then the church should be an ocean. It's not a museum for good people. It's a hospital for the broken. And if we could just remember that and realize that, which means I don't have to hide my failure. I don't have to hide my sin, because it doesn't depend on me. It depends on him. See, the church should be a place where we can go and say, I have a serious problem. I am having an affair. I am addicted to drugs. I am an alcoholic. We should be able to say that. We were in a small group once, and we had a man come, and we didn't know anything about him. And all of a sudden one day he starts telling us about his life. And he's addicted to porn, and now he does this. And I was so shocked, but I was like, that's what small groups are for, so that we can come alongside people and help them. But somehow we've gotten so religious and so righteous, self-righteous, and it's just not what's supposed to happen. He says, it's not a museum for good people, it's a hospital for the broken, which means I don't have to hide my failure. I don't have to hide my sin, because it depends. Okay, we already read that. See, because when I was God's enemy, and certainly not a fan, he looked down and said, I want that man, which is why Jesus hated religion, and for it he called them fools. Don't you see so much better than just following some rules? Let me clarify. I love the church, I love the Bible, and yes, I believe in sin. But if Jesus came to your church, would they actually let him in? See, remember, he was called a glutton and a drunkard by religious men, but the Son of God never supports self-righteousness, not now or not then. Now, back to the point, one thing is vital to mention, how Jesus and religion are on opposite spectrum. See, one's the work of God, but one's man's made invention. See, one is the cure, but the other's the infection. I love that, because I think that's what Jesus is saying when he gets in front of all the people in the synagogue, and he's saying, you guys are... You're the infection. You're not the cure. I'm coming to be the cure. He said, see, because religion says do, and Jesus says done. Religion says slave, but Jesus says son. Religion puts you in bondage while Jesus sets you free. Religion makes you blind, but Jesus makes you see. And that's why religion and Jesus are two different clans. Religion is man searching for God. Christianity is God searching for man, which is why salvation is freely mine and forgiveness is my own, not based on my merits, but Jesus' obedience alone. Because he took the crown of thorns and the blood dripped down his face. He took what we all deserved. I guess that's why you call it grace. And while being murdered, he yelled, Father, forgive them. They do not know what they do. Because when he was dangling on that cross, he was thinking of you. And he absorbed all your sin and buried it in the tomb, which is why I'm kneeling at the cross saying, come on, there's room. So for religion, no, I hate it. In fact, I literally resent it, because when Jesus said it is finished, I believe he meant it. So I want to just end today and say Jesus is not the author of this religion, this oppressiveness that you might feel. And if that's you today, I want you to stop and say, God, I don't want to be that way anymore. Take that oppression away from me and help me to realize there's such freedom in knowing you, and help me be free to love you, because the more I love you, the more I'm going to know you, the more I'm going to want to do things because of that. All right, I hope you were encouraged by that today, being able to see the difference between someone who feels like they have to be religious or someone who just loves Jesus with all their heart. Hope this helps you today. Have a really good week.